Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today at this interesting conference. I'm so excited about the subject and the topic, and I hope you are as well. Welcome to the DigiConnect Open Banking Digi Conference today, 25th of January, 2021. My name is Akinola from the DigiConnect team. DigiConnect is a division of Great Minds Group, GM Events. And since the pandemic last year, we've been leading some of the top line conversations on different subjects, bringing together industry experts, stakeholders across industries to facilitate different conversation on different subjects, looking at the future, technology, innovation, and how our new normal is shaping the way we live and the way we operate our businesses and all that. And we are so excited to be hosting today's conference on the subject of open banking, which is a new innovative way of banking that is going to transform the BFSI sector, not only in the MENA region, but across the globe. And we have an interesting lineup of speakers today that will be helping us to shape that conversation. Now, the theme for today's conference is harnessing API technology and open banking to transform the future of banking and payments in the MENA region. Before we get straight into it, I would like to say a big thank you to our media and knowledge partners who have helped us to shape the program, promote the program, and also provide research documents and all that to help us get more grounded in this subject. Oxford Business Group, World Finance Informs, Smart Money Match, the FinTech Times, the FinTech Power 50, and Holland FinTech. Also, I would like to say a big thank you to all our partners and sponsors who have also helped to provide thought leadership in the area of innovation and technology to help us shape the program as well. And I think the most interesting thing about open banking subject is the fact that it's a combination of both the technology and the business sense. And I think there is no way we can have a complete dialogue about open banking without involving top, leading innovative tech companies that are driving different innovation in the whole open banking ecosystem. I would like to say a big thank you to our diamond partner, Wipro, our gold sponsor, Oracle, platinum partner, Thales, our technology partners, Red Hat, Banfico, WSO2, ACI, Universal System, Software AG, Denodo, GELLIFY, Capgemini, Informatica, Fiorano, and IronNet cybersecurity company. Thank you so much for your support, and we look forward to your presentations and insight as well. We have a packed program. It's going to be a long, but we're going to make it as interesting as possible. And talking about making it interesting and interactive, we would like to encourage you to please put up your cameras and let's see your faces. If you are able to do so, that would be nice. Also note that all participants are muted for the purpose of this call to avoid background noises and of course for decorum. And we will all be able to enjoy the program. Also, if you would like to participate, note that you can do that through the chat box, and we're able to bring you into the program to be part of the conversation. You can drop in your questions and also to be able to participate as well. If you have any network issue during the course of this program, please, you can join back using the same link, and they will be able to admit you in as well. And the last thing I would like to say, I have some just quick, before I bring on the chairman, we have a lucky draw, live virtual lucky draw to run on the program. And we're giving away 2 free iPads, iPad 8 generation 2020. We have 2 draws. One is going to be around 12 to 12:30 p.m. Dubai time, depending on wherever you're joining from. All you need to do is just to be on the call. And if you're registered on the call, you stand a chance to win. Then the second draw will be between 2 o'clock and 2:30 on this program, and we will be running it live, and it's going to be open for you to see. We'll be able to select the 2 winners that will be able to, grab this offer. So thank you very much once again for joining us today, and I would like to introduce the chairman for today's conference, and that is in the person of Mr. Umar Salim. Umar is a seasoned professional with 29 years of experience in turnaround and restructuring, corporate finance, hands-on operations management, and advisory services across a broad spectrum of industries. He's a strong, multifaceted thought leader and speaker at various business transformation and finance-related conferences across the GCC. Thank you very much, Mr. Umar, for taking the time to help drive this conversation. Good morning, how are you?
Thank you very much. Good morning, Akinola and everybody else. Shall we start?
Yes, please.
Okay, great. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I think it's a very interesting and a very topical subject that we're discussing today, open banking. Consistent with wider social shifts towards transparency, data standards, and sharing, open banking is an enabler for increased competition, innovation, and customer centricity. Open banking provides an opportunity to open up the banking industry, ignite innovation, and enhance the public's experience with the financial services industry. By providing access to data to third parties, open banking levels the playing field between traditional incumbent financial service providers and new disruptors. Incumbents are at risk of falling behind more technology-enabled peers, as well as new market entrants, such as the fintechs. While many customers' concerns about security and privacy currently outweigh the perceived benefits of open banking, there is already a large market for its solutions. It is estimated that open banking has a potential to create a revenue opportunity of at least $9.2 billion by 2022 across retail and SME markets. Examples of the numerous use cases enabled by open API data include account aggregation, better financial management, credit scoring customers, and integrated lending and accounting platforms for SMEs. Over time, more innovative propositions should completely change how financial services are delivered and integrated into everyday experiences. Companies should target affluent, young, urban populations as an initial customer market, although this will grow and widen as propositions mature. Financial services companies need to ensure that they have a compelling vision of how they will stand out in a highly competitive and transparent environment. It is not feasible to chase all the potential open banking opportunities, so firms will need to focus on developing differentiated propositions and capabilities. They will need to make choices about addressing capability gaps through acquisition, partnering, or operating as part of an ecosystem of providers. Regardless of positioning, there are some common characteristics which are required to succeed in an open banking environment, which include a customer-centric operating model, strong data analytics capabilities, integrated and secure technology platform, as well as an agile and open working culture. Although the future is uncertain, companies cannot afford to wait and see how it unfolds. A strategic approach to open banking is critical if companies want to be confident of success. The industry faces a number of challenges. These include the fact that banking still suffers from a poor reputation and relatively low levels of trust when compared to other industries. Many of the incumbents are still struggling to modernize their IT platforms and to embrace digital in a way that fundamentally changes the cost base and the way customers are served. A wave of new challenger banks have entered the market with these opportunities at the heart of these propositions. However, increased competition is no longer the only objective of open banking. As consumers, we are more aware than ever before of the importance and value of data about us and how it is shared and used. This not only applies to financial services, but across a wide range of sectors from utilities to retail to transport. Whilst the value of this data is not disputed, questions around who has access to it and for what purpose have become ever more relevant, both for us as consumers, but also for those organizations that have access to this data. Open banking touches on all the important themes. A thriving community of innovators is ready to translate our transactional statement data into valuable tools to help us manage our finances better, to find new and better services more easily, and to connect our banking data to other services in housing, travel, health, and utilities. As such, open banking has the potential to radically transform the way in which we engage in banking services, receive money, and make payments. It is likely to cause significant disruption to how consumers, personal and particularly SMEs, think about banking, who should provide banking services, who will inform and guide us, How, when, and why will we allow organizations that are not our banks to have access to our financial data? Could this even change the composition of the traditional banking institutional landscape? Some think this could be the catalyst behind a revolution in how we perceive personal and SME banking. Finally, open banking has trust and consent at its heart, as the exchange of data will be for services that add value, and it is that which will drive the adoption of new products and services. I hope you find today's conference insightful and useful. Thank you. Akinola, I believe we have a video presentation.
Yes, please. Thank you, Oxford Business Group. Back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so we will start with the first session, which is the shift to open banking, accelerating the development of open banking ecosystem in the MENA region and its impact of the region's BFSI sector. So the panelists we have are Steve Monahan, EVP and Chief Digital Officer, Riyadh Bank. Steve was until recently the EVP and Chief Digital Officer of Riyadh Bank, where he led various digital innovative projects for the bank. He is currently a general partner at FinMarai. We have Ahmed Naimi, Head of Digital Transformation and Project Management from Bahrain Institute of Banking and Finance. We have Anmol Grover, Global Practice Head of Open Banking Wipro. Anmol is an experienced professional with a demonstrated history of working in the information technology and services industry with some of the largest banking and financial services clients. And last but not least, we have Enrique Ortega, Managing Director for GELLIFY Middle East. Enrique is the Managing Director, Business Innovation Consulting, lead at GELLIFY, where he is involved in connecting high-tech B2B startups with organizations to innovate processes, products, and business models, providing investments and the know-how of experts in digital transformation and innovative software products. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, so let's start with our first question. Steve, if I may start with you. How do you see the shift to open banking that is sweeping through the MENA region? And how do you think this will transform the BFSI sector as we know it?
Good morning. So I think open banking provides some pretty interesting opportunities for the MENA region. I think the primary purpose of open banking is really to start driving inclusion in banking services, and many regulators around the world have certainly taken that view. I think the Middle East actually offers a very young population versus other markets in Europe and across into Asia, where in many of the major markets in Asia where you have open banking operating, they're aging populations. So you have a very different mix within the consumer base. And so that opens itself up to customers that want new innovative experiences and are able to use information in different ways. I think open banking from a regulatory standpoint is being pushed out in that vein to try and drive greater inclusion in financial services and to increase, of course, competition. I think the big challenge for most of the institutions in open banking is to really think about how they differentiate beyond just simply availing or opening up their APIs and information services to partners. It's to really think through what types of services, products that you offer out to the market to really differentiate. And I think that'll be the primary challenge in the Middle East.
Okay, great. Ahmed, what are your thoughts?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me on board. Well, in terms of open banking, when we talk about open banking, we talk about the basically data revolution as it is currently sweeping through the financial sector and other sectors as well. Banks used to hold transactions and account data very close to them in a closed environment sort of thing. However, with data, lots of innovative ideas and sort of customer-centric solutions can be sought. And as such, regulators now around the world are requiring banks to make account of the available data to sort of license third parties. The aim of that, mainly the aim of that move, is to trigger sort of a new competition in the industry, encourage innovation, and sort of give customers and businesses access to sort of better deals. So as such, Bahrain has always been the frontier and a leader in the financial sector in the region, as it led various financial services facilities and regulations. Like in Singapore, London, authorities in Bahrain are working very closely with fintech providers, with startups, to develop sort of a data-fueled model of banking that is sort of transparent, efficient, and also at the same time secure. If I may say, in December 2019, Bahrain launched the first open banking product in MENA. The open banking basically revolution in MENA has been kickstarted by the Central Bank of Bahrain, making it the first in the Middle East to introduce regulations that mandated the adoption of open banking by all retail banks. And it's a big step. It was a significant step for the region's financial sort of sector. So the financial sector will no longer be I'm going to talk from a Bahrain perspective, it's not going to be the same anymore. More competition is going to rise, more customer-centric solutions will be adapted, a full focus will be shifted towards customer experience, innovative ideas and products are going to determine sort of which financial institution we as customers will deal with and work with.
Okay, excellent. Enrique, over to you. What are your thoughts on this?
Thanks, and good morning, everyone. Look, I believe the Middle East is undergoing a very peculiar wave of transformation across financial services. On one hand, there's all these lessons learned from other markets, how regulation led all the changes and transformed the market in Europe, or how market-led changes transformed banks in the US. On the other hand, the lack of, and I agree with Ahmed here, the lack of a clear data regulation, I think, as opposed, for example, to Europe, I think is putting data as an asset that is owned by banks, which makes it a big challenge when it needs to be shared openly with other entities, right? On top of everything, the Middle East, I think, faces several legacy walls, technology, cultural skills. And then on the complete opposite side of things, I also believe that the Middle East is probably at its peak in terms of fintech incubation and acceleration. And banks are slowly starting to incorporate fintech collaboration and introducing innovation into their strategies. Now, with central banks actively entering open banking space, as Ahmed said, led by Bahrain, and also recently KSA announcing the regulation that they have in mind, there's probably the perfect storm forming that will boost, finally, in my opinion, a true open banking and open innovation ecosystem. With new services, new business models flourishing, and I don't think this will transform only financial services as an industry, but industry boundaries will probably be blurred, and open banking will probably dip into many other industries as well. So I think there's a great opportunity now for the Middle East if the right steps are taken.
Okay, excellent. Anmol, what are your thoughts on this?
Very good morning, and thank you for having me. If I look at the MENA market, looking at the favorable demographics, looking at the regulation, and in my experience, geographies or countries that have regulation-driven initiatives have been reasonably more successful than otherwise. So I think it's a unique opportunity for the MENA region. The fundamental disruption that's going to happen is in the business model itself. And this is something that we've seen in other countries. There's a benefit of hindsight that the region can, pick up the best practices from. The challenge also that I see potentially has been pointed out earlier. One was primarily from a legacy standpoint, but also in terms of data privacy and standards. In UK, for example, we've spent about 4 years just defining the standards, working with the standards body, which we were also involved in. So I think, fundamentally, the opportunity is tremendous. The groundwork that has been laid out so far and the demographics, etc., are favorable. The challenge that we need to address is data security, standards, and legacy.
Okay, interesting. How would you gentlemen see the region's BFSI sector? Do you think is it on track when it comes to the adoption of open banking, and how can we accelerate that development of open banking ecosystem in the region? Steve, if you'd like to comment on that.
Sure. I think, well, it's still a very nascent initiative here in the Middle East. I mean, other countries have certainly got in advance of it, and there are some great opportunities to learn from some of those things. I think that what's interesting in the Middle East is primarily the demographic, and I would anticipate with a much younger demographic, they will be able to or demand access to information services far more than perhaps some of the other markets. The real opportunity, though, is, as we know, information is a commodity and insight's invaluable. So opening an API and fulfilling the requirements of the legislation is kind of one thing. How to use it to create competitive advantage is where the real battle game is. Clearly, fintech had a record year last year in the Middle East. And still many of the business models that are coming in are largely tailored from overseas. I think you'll start seeing a shift with fintechs looking at how they create new types of value and insight for customers that create differentiated services in inclusion. And already in Saudi Arabia, you're starting to see, through the summer or Saudi Central Bank sandbox. Yes, indeed. You're starting to see that some pretty interesting initiatives that start to drive inclusion and really scaled business models, which is quite interesting. So I think that the big focus and the big acceleration is going to happen when people are really focused on trying to drive inclusion in financial services and not just reinventing, using the information that's now coming out of the banks through open banking, but really trying to invent new types of services that leverage that information to create value or insight for consumers. So I anticipate that actually the Middle East will see this tick up much faster than you have seen in other markets. I think it's primed demographically and also from a learning perspective for quite significant traction in the coming years.
So Steve, would you say on a scale of 1 to 10, I mean, the region's BFSI sector for open banking, where would you rank the region?
Yeah, as I did in rehearsal, I have to apologize and front it. I'll only give it a 2, and that's just not. It's not a reflection of quality or intent. It's just a reality of where the region is. The fintech ecosystem's still building. The legislation's yet to come out in most countries in the Middle East. Just coming, just recently announced in Saudi and partially operational in Bahrain. But I think we've barely begun to scratch the surface of open banking, its potential. And the last, just one other point there is that open banking itself is just one slither of what's possible when you start utilizing this infrastructure for marketplace banking and banking as a service as well. I think that's really when things start to become interesting. And there's very few plans from banks in that area at the moment.
Okay, thanks. Ahmed, Steve said it's a 2 out of 10, and I'm sure you will disagree as far as Bahrain is concerned. So, 2 questions for you. What do you think where we stand on a scale of 1 to 10 in the region? And second question, how can we accelerate the development of open banking across the region? What are the lessons we can learn from Bahrain, which seems to be the market leader here?
Right. In terms of a scale, I would agree in terms of a region that it may be at a level 2 or 3, but in Bahrain in particular, I would actually take that scale much higher. So at around, say, 6, we still have a lot of room to learn, a lot of room to improve on when it comes to open banking. So I would say around 6 for Bahrain and around 3 for the region.
Okay.
when we talk about accelerating or if we are actually on track or not, there are a lot of factors when we speak about the financial sector being on track or not, and how we can actually accelerate that. First of all, looking at it from a technology point of view, like Steve mentioned and also Enrique earlier, no, the region is not ready. So why? Because as my colleague said, most of the organization we have still do have legacy systems. IT and systems across the region were always looked at as a cost centers instead of an investment centers. Up until this fintech era that we are living now, things started to change, perception has changed. And yet till date, the adoption of new techs still did not. We are still lacking behind when it comes to systems. In terms of
how do we change that?
It's mainly, if I talk from my perspective, it's mainly from education perspective. So the people need to be educated, executive need to be educated, board needs to be educated when it comes to how those technologies are impacting the businesses that we work with today. So everything is changing. We're getting into a new digital era where board of directors need to put those sort of policies that they will have sort of inclusion and also at the same time digital mindsets in the organizations. So everything is basically changing. When it comes to regulations, I would say also somehow when we talk about Bahrain, yes, we're on track. In the region, not very much. But matter of fact, we as Bahrain are leading the regulations on fintech, on open banking across the board, as I mentioned earlier. When it comes to culture and mindset, a lot needs to be done. So yes, again, we are not on track. It needs a lot of work in terms, culture cannot change overnight. So it needs a lot of work, a lot of aspects that we actually need to work on in terms of organization. It has to come from top to bottom. It cannot start from the bottom up. So the culture has to go from a board level and be enforced down towards executives and so on and so forth downwards. Another aspect, job security, also mentioned earlier by my colleague, and data security mentioned, but job security plays a major part here. When it comes to human capital development, that needs to be improved. There's a major gap between what individuals know and where we want to be. So there's a major gap when it comes to business users understanding technology. They always feel that threat, technology is coming to take over our jobs. Yet technology may actually create new opportunities and open up new doors. And this is the sort of mindset or shift that we need to change or work with. So training plays a major role in terms of business users when we teach them about technology or digital. But at the same time, we need to create a huge, there is still a huge gap when it comes to IT professionals in the region that will actually be able to take on board these changes and technologies on board.
Okay, well, thank you for that perspective. Enrique, moving on to you on a scale of 1 to 10, same question, what do you think, or where do you think rather the region is? And secondly, what can be done to accelerate the development of open banking ecosystem in the region?
Look, I think it's very difficult to give one number because I think we need to see this from different angles, right? Fully agree with Ahmed. From a technology legacy point of view, very much behind. On the other hand, I think that many players of the whole open banking ecosystem are like players warming up on the side of the field, just waiting for the coach to let them in, right? So on the other side, I think I would actually rate the Middle East's readiness, at least, probably above 5. But as I said before, there's a great heritage, legacy heritage from technology, culture, skills, etc.
Sorry, if I'm there, when you say from a readiness standpoint, it's at a 5. Can you please elaborate on the readiness part?
Probably on the more innovation parts, also related, of course, to the demographics of the region, and also, as I said before, in terms of, I think we have never seen as many fintechs ready, both B2C and B2B, ready to plug in and make use of all the changes that are about to happen. The amount of incubation and acceleration that is happening in the region is is promising. From that point of view, I think one side of the game is ready. But as I said, banks here are like a very good-looking man in a nice suit, but with a very aching, stiff, and old body, right? That lacks the agility to play the game, to dance along the music. Many banks are investing into several innovative-looking initiatives. They're spending a lot of money into the suit, into the dress, into the makeup, etc. But they're carrying over a very cumbersome, tightly coupled technology infrastructure, right? I think very little banks have wisely spent time and effort into truly decoupling their technology landscape. And then, as I said before, on top of that, you have data, right? Which the ownership is questioned and makes it very difficult to be shared openly. Now, what can we do to accelerate the development of the open banking ecosystem? As Ahmed said, I think it's a matter of education. Look what PSD2 has done in Europe, right? The majority of open banking related initiatives that are happening right now in Europe are outside of PSD2. What PSD2 really did is a deep change in the mindset of the stakeholders, right? So given the Middle Eastern context, I think regulation will definitely help from a pure open banking point of view, but also in regards to the treatment and ownership of data. As I said, stakeholders, some of the stakeholders of one side of the game are ready, the others need to step up. I think that regulation and a change in mind shift will help.
Okay, great. Anmol, over to you. What are your thoughts and how can we accelerate the development?
Sure. So, you know, in terms of maturity, different countries are at different stages and, you know, the maturity levels are different. But we are definitely moving in the right direction with the regulation and the encouragement to fintechs. In terms of the strategy, I think that is very important to view this not only as a regulation, but also as a disruption. And if your strategy is aligned more towards not only compliance, but also towards the monetization aspect, then it becomes a far more all-inclusive and a further long-term you know, viewpoint. I think perception is one of the challenges that we've seen you know, across the globe. You know, I touched upon the term open banking itself has somehow misled, you know, people in a number of countries based on our experiences. And the perception that Ahmed touched upon some time back, you know, is a big factor because this involves collaboration, internal collaboration where different business units of banks work together. Also collaboration with fintechs as well as external parties, and that is something that involves a change in culture itself, and for the consumers also to understand that this is something that's going to benefit them, and they are in control of their data. The building blocks, or what can make this successful, I think some of it is already there in the region. For example, the investments. Fintechs, another example. I think there are some gaps that need to be addressed. For example, skills that need to be developed to cater to the needs of this new world. Also, the technology that needs to be delivered as a result of that. How do all these different entities, stakeholders stick together and deliver an outcome, a business outcome, as opposed to a traditional way of working, which is very one-to-one and linear. A collaborative way of working. I think that's what will have to change.
Okay, I think we all talked about the sort of acceleration from the banks and the fintech standpoint. We didn't talk much about the consumer and educating the customer, because that seems to be also a big challenge and a big hurdle, because people seem a little hesitant to share their data with third parties, financial service providers. So what are your thoughts on that? Anyone who would like to take that?
I'll just kickstart here. So, I'll just pick up one or two examples from the UK, for example. When we started the PIN revolution here in the UK, there was this big advertising signs that people used to carry. And I still remember looking at some of those signs and, trying to relate it to what's happening. So I think a little bit of advertising would help, number one. Second, the term itself, open banking, may have to be positioned slightly differently. And I'll pick up two examples of how it has been done differently in the world. One, for example, in Australia, it's more being positioned as, the data rights, the consumer data right movement. And I'll pick up another example. For example, in India, this has been positioned as Sehmati, which is basically, the translation, the Hindi translation towards collaboration. So a similar term, would actually be helpful.
Okay. Anybody else would like to pitch in?
As a product guy, I would say that it's really the key is to start developing the right sorts of products and services to prove the value to the customer, rather than, education's always important, but I think just talking about it and making data available isn't going to solve the problem from a consumer standpoint. I think everyone knows that there's power in data, and if you're able to actually harness that power and create new types of value for consumers, that's really the way that you're going to accelerate adoption.
I'll add my voice to Steve. From education is one part, but the other part is actually the product itself and how we actually can position it in a way that it shows the benefits that are available for the consumers. So if it's well designed, focused on a customer-centric sort of approach, then it's going to sell itself. People are going to see the benefits out of that and start using it and start adapting these technologies.
Okay, I think we talked a little bit about the challenges earlier in our sort of comments, and one of them was the digital infrastructure that kind of came up as a challenge. So my next question is, what are the challenges you see, and how can we build a resilient digital infrastructure that will deliver a seamless deployment and of this technology to ensure that it delivers its promises and its potential? How do we ensure that we build a resilient infrastructure within the fintech industry and the financial services industry? Steve, would you like to take this first?
Yeah, sure. I think it's very clear that infrastructure is an issue in the Middle East, and I think that in some ways that it's lagging some of the other geographies, which is starting to learn the real value of technology. And the value of technology is always, technology's sole purpose is to arbitrage time. So if you're able to start using information in a very effective way, so you have the right insight at the right time in the right place, that actually brings value for consumers and enables you to scale different sorts of opportunities, etc. I think what we're seeing in the Middle East is more a patchwork approach to trying to get to that point of having new real-time systems. Most of the geographies around the world, the most successful banks who have really hyperscaled have been ones that have completely redone their core banking systems, not just enhanced the current version, but have really taken a cold hard look at it. That started really with Commonwealth Bank in Australia, I think almost 2 decades ago, that did a massive transformation and then became one of the most successful digital banks anywhere in the world, and continued to do so in this day. DBS, where I used to work, same. You set it out to the side. They did keep the old core, but they completely transformed everything out to the customer, and that core still continues to provide problems. I understand it to this day, and who knows where things might change there. But I think really to understand architecture and to very heavily focus on architecture. I think architecture is a bit of a weakness that I've noticed in the Middle East, and I think that really architecting solutions and really focusing in on how to develop new types of experiences and use technology to its potential, not to the potential of what you do today in banking. Technology, if you're able to use it effectively, is capable of a lot more and requires a fresh look at business models and a fresh look at product. Because the old product just doesn't, it's not just here's a new processor and it runs faster. I think that level of reinvention hasn't really happened in the Middle East yet, and I think that that's where the real opportunity lies. And if the banks don't do it, it'll certainly be the fintechs once they can get their hands on data.
I mean, I find that a bit strange, to be honest, because every bank that at least I talk to, has a digital strategy. They've hired, tier 1 consulting firms, the McKinseys of the world, to develop their digital strategies. So they seem to have recognize the challenges that they face in case, they do not adopt the open banking. They have the funds. The banks are making, good amounts of profit in this part of the world. So it's a bit strange that, with knowing exactly what's going to come, down as competition in a 6, 12, 18 months time, and already that's happening around them, with buy now, pay later kind of, players in the market as well, with P2P lending, et cetera, et cetera. We've got Anmol and Enrique here, who are sort of more on the technology sort of service provider side. If I can go to either of you first.
Sorry, may I just address your point on the tier one providers, because none of the good innovation that's happened in fintech or in banks, and I judge global banking awards around the world for the last 10 years, none of that's come from tier one consulting providers. Tier one are generally backward looking, and they look at what's worked somewhere else and then you try and replicate it.
Yeah, they give you.
But if you're really looking at innovating, and the Middle Eastern market, it does have its nuances versus other markets. So taking in transplanting is not necessarily the right way either. And I think that really the requirements, the infrastructure, the people, the culture are really going to drive an entirely new wave of innovation. And that's really something that you're not going to get from the tier one consulting providers. I think that's half the problem in the Middle East.
Okay, point taken. Enrique, you want to say something?
I was going to say I spent the majority of my life in a tier one. I'm going to say it's a tier 1.2. And I have helped many banks and many other companies in their digital strategy with a very heavy focus on the architecture and the technology landscape. Many banks, I mean, it's needless to say that many banks have kind of a spaghetti architecture, right? So they have been building functionality over time, year after year, on their core banking, and it is impossible now to decouple it to provide a layered approach, etc., which is now absolutely hindering these banks to move forward. And you're seeing how you've seen this wave of some successful, some less banks that have started greenfield digital operations with a different brand, and even from a technology landscape completely different. Some have succeeded, some have not. But the amount of investment that you need to do here is considerable. So I have seen in my own experience how technology strategies and digital strategies have been very enthusiastic during the development, but when it comes to actually starting to put money and to put efforts and this into the game, many banks just hold back and think it twice, etc. But I need to come back to the main challenge in terms of mindset, which is very much related to what I said, right? And this is the great legacy of PSD2. It's the change of mindset, right? Where competitors are not competitors anymore, but partners in your strategy. You give up something in return of a much bigger piece of the cake. And I think that's a key challenge that I see here at different levels, from a sharing data point of view, from a technology investment point of view, and many others. As I said, for example, in Italy, banks are starting to collaborate with each other outside of PSD2, but thanks to PSD2. So this is going to be this whole mindset shift and change that needs to happen is going to be one of the biggest challenge. Technology, of course, but technology has always been a challenge for the past 20 years.
Okay. We seem to have a lot of questions, and quite a few of them are addressed to Ahmed. So before we go to Ahmed and some of those questions, Anmol, very quickly, 30 seconds, what's your view on the challenges and the digital infrastructure?
Sure. Banks recognize the challenges. I think they are also looking to approach using protective and aggressive strategies. But legacy has always been a challenge. New ways of architecting solutions is a big issue. How do you pull data? How do you work with legacy and at the same time modernize is the biggest challenge that we are seeing. And there is also this focus from a standardization perspective, not only from a core banking, but how to move towards a coreless banking. And how do you adopt to the new ways of working like cloud, like open architecture. So I think those are some of the issues that need to be addressed in parallel.
Amar, let me just add on that as well. from my perspective, we spoke about the technology aspect, okay, from digitally sort of resilient infrastructure sort of. But digital resilience, if I may add, is understanding when you may be at risk online, knowing what to do if something goes wrong, learning from your experiences, and being able to recover from any sort of difficulties or sort of upsets. So there are elements in the organization when we talk about digital resilience that we need to look at very closely, like the business processes, the business model, the culture of the organization, but at the same time, then looking at the technology. Okay, we often see a lot of organizations, a lot of banks, they focus solely on a process, but they don't look at all those full elements, and that leaves a significant gap in the organization. So there are certain elements we need to actually take on board. We need to create sort of a dialogue in the organization, so no sort of transformation can be successful without proper communication and shared plan. Okay, allowing experimentations. We know that for a fact that in the region, experimentation is very difficult. Trial and error is sort of the no in banks and organizations. We do not allow experimentation in organizations. We do not promote a culture of innovation and creativity. We do not much. Another aspect, investing in sort of training. Employees first and foremost need to understand why, the why aspect behind this digital change. Why are we embracing open banking? Why are we changing the perspective of how we work? The World Economic Forum report said in its report by 2025, the job market as we know it today will change drastically. The skills needed are more towards digital skills, along with creative thinking, innovative mindset, analytical thinking, and also customer-oriented sort of mindsets. Also, another aspect is improving on the employee involvement. Employees, as I stated earlier, need to feel part of the organization, need to be included in decisions, not being, we cannot any longer take a decision and just force it on the entire scale of employees. We need to find, we need to get their feedback, need to get an input from them. So if you talk about digital resilience, okay, technology is also a major part of that. But when you talk about digital resilience, I think all these aspects need to be looked at very, very closely.
Okay, great. I'm going to have to take a couple of questions because we have quite a few of them. So one question from Yasser Ahmed, which is, from my position as head of digital banking, how can I persuade the top management and other stakeholders to adopt the open banking into our digital banking strategy? And how can I overcome the constraints of the compliance and information security teams when it comes to sharing the customer data with others? Steve, you want to take a stab at it? Or Ahmed, would you like to go first?
Fine.
I'm happy to take a bit, Ahmed.
Okay, Steve.
Just very quickly, I think that, you know, the first stage in anything is always learning, then venturing, then capital. So I think the first thing is to ensure that the board and the executive team really understands what open banking is, what it can do. Second is to really focus on the customer and come up with use cases that clearly identify a current customer problem and resolve it to create value for the customer that they didn't have before. I think that focus on just those two things, that would be more than enough to get started.
Okay, great. Ahmed, over to you.
I'll say exactly like what Steve mentioned, was in the same line. We had some banks that came to us saying the exact same thing. I had some individuals or friends from organizations or banks that they mentioned exactly the same thing, where they have a bit of a challenge in terms of convincing the management or the board about pursuing open banking. And what we started to do is put a plan in terms of training plan from a board level all the way down in terms of cybersecurity training, what are the prospects of cybersecurity, talking about the trends currently happening in the region and across the world, how the digital change is changing the infrastructure there as we know it, and then at the same time talking about open banking and the benefits that it may entail, but at the same time talking about its risks as well. So giving all the options, putting all the options on the table for the executives and board, but then slowly trying to change that perspective of what they have. And a lot of those boards that we've actually did those trainings for, they had a sort of a mindset shift where they just started thinking, okay, if we do not get on that bandwagon, we may be left behind. Sort of the Kodak example, BlackBerry, Kodak, and all that. If you're not going to adapt to what technology is going towards, you will be left behind.
Correct. Okay, Enrique, would you like to add something very quickly? We're out of time.
Very quickly, open banking is not a game of one, it's a game of many. So again, part of the mind shift change, I would co-create with all my stakeholders. I would invite my customers in co-creation sessions. I would invite eventually other banks. I would invite fintechs and co-create with all of them around the table my own strategy around open banking. So again, as I said, a game of many, not a game of one.
Okay, excellent. Anmol,
sure.
last comment.
Absolutely. So, I think we've worked with many banks in terms of business case definition, etc. But one of the models that seem to have worked well is, when you put your skin in the game, and I touched upon this earlier in terms of things like revenue sharing models, where a set of parties come together and mitigate the risk and also take, work in terms of revenue co-creation. That gives a lot more confidence as opposed to the traditional way of working.
Okay, thank you very much, all the panelists, Steve, Ahmed, Enrique, and Anmol. That was a very valuable session. Given the number of questions we have, I wish we had the time to answer all these questions, but unfortunately we don't. We have a pretty packed agenda, so we can't take all these questions at this point in time. But please feel free to reach to any of us after the conference, and we will be happy to have offline discussions with yourselves. So thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much for a very interactive session. Really appreciate it. And with that, we conclude the first panel discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes.